here for this very important session on building the EV supply chain in India. I think it's very important simply because, given the fact that, the pace of EV penetration in India is very fast right now, and now it is leading up to scale, like what we saw being discussed in the previous session. So with that, if I may begin with you, Vivek, and want to understand from you, is it still a chicken and an egg situation regarding, component makers being willing to invest into EV technology? And what, in your opinion, is right now the current state of EV supply chain in India, and what does the future behold?
So, thank you, Venk. It's not a chicken and egg. I think every supplier I know is willing to and is actively investing in EV. I think there are very few who are saying that we will not invest in EV. There are people who have, frankly, very little knowledge or capability are also investing in EV. So that phase is way past. I think the journey for a lot of the, I'd say, more forward-thinking tier ones started way earlier. Because even when EV penetration in India was low, it was already picking up in the rest of the world. Last quarter, for example, we did about $25 billion of export, and most of it was for EV players outside the country. And this has been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. So, yeah, with scale come advantages. I think readiness is very high. If you look at the categories, there is materials, which is where we lack in this country. You don't have things like rare earth, like neodymium. The battery part is still to be solved for most people. But if you look beyond that and you go to the second category, which is the powertrain, which is the important part, and you look at motor, inverter, gearbox, these are the three things. And I think we are fairly proficient apart from the power electronics bit, which is also being figured out as we speak. The rest of the vehicle is more or less similar with a few differences in applications, etc., which as volumes pick up, people are finding it themselves. So I don't think it's an intractable problem. I think it's a problem that is being solved. And if you look at it patiently from point to point, like if we were doing this conference 3 years ago, this would have been 0, right? And now it is at a very, very high number already. If you close your eyes, go to sleep, and wake up 3 years later, this question would have been answered automatically, because supply may not create demand, it almost never does, but demand inevitably will create supply. So if you have incentives that empower the consumers to buy vehicles, I mean, I'm all for PLI, etc., because it benefits us, but I mean, I would rather the consumer get that benefit. You give subsidies to the consumer to buy electric vehicles, that would spur everything and it will solve itself. So yeah, frankly, I am far more optimistic than I have ever been about electrification globally and in India.
Right. And if I may take that to you, Ravi, so, like how Vivek just mentioned that, some of the key components, the drivetrain components and all. So for the Tata Group, I mean, you've taken really a lead in terms of, the EV volumes in the country, and Tata Autocomp as well, you're supplying a lot of these components. So what, according to you, are some of these, low-hanging fruits in terms of the parts when we talk about, specifically about the high-voltage EV components that you think can be localized in India so as to improve the cost structures and make EVs more competitive with ICE?
Yeah, you've gone into a higher segment of the EVs, talking about high voltage, but depends what you say is high voltage. Like if you say anything about 300 volts is high voltage, yes, there is a huge opportunity for those components. The components, as was said just now, is that it's not about just the Indian market, but it's also about the global market for components. So there will be a future coming up in this area. We have already started some component development for 850 volts for the global market. We have components on the 300 volts, to about 850 volts already in the works. There is R&D investment as well as investment in plant and machinery. Host of components will be there as you go along, right from what we do as electric compressors. Obviously, the battery pack itself will have to be configured for a higher voltage. We have motors, traction motors going at higher voltage. We have motors which do the thermal management for cooling fans. Those also are going into the high voltage. So there's a host of components which come into play with the high voltage play. As far as the Indian market goes, we have not seen any voltages going still beyond 320 to 330. At best, 380 is what we have seen, but beyond that, it's not there as yet. And when we get into the realms of about 800, 850 volts, it's another ball game altogether. But that development also is in the works. So I'm not sure whether that answers your question on high voltage. That's where we are.
Right. No, it does to quite an extent. And, like you mentioned that these extensively high voltage, products are not there in Indian market yet. So are you leveraging more of export opportunities as of now to sort of, be going with your operations?
One is export. Another is, I think the bus segment could catch on to the high voltage. We don't expect too much of very high voltages in the 2 and 3 wheeler or even in the small commercial vehicle segment because it has its own challenges. But I think the higher range of passenger cars and the bus and truck. The trucks have not yet caught on in India, although some development has started with a few truck makers. But I think that segment will have a larger component of high voltage application.
Sure. With that, I'll come to you, Dhanendra and Nilesh. Ravi just mentioned that, India is sort of short in supply with respect to the raw material. And both of you represent companies who are into material technology and material supplies. So, material suppliers are sort of very key stakeholders in the overall supply chain. So your perspective, Dhanendra, about, how do you see yourself and your operations panning out when we talk about, increasing adoption of EVs in India?
So I talk to automotive manufacturers across the globe, whether it's India, Detroit, Shanghai, Seoul, and the three things come to the top, and in today's panel discussion as well, the three things have been highlighted. One was the cost, really, how it can be competitive. The second thing was, how we can reduce the environmental impact. And the third thing comes up, surety of supply or the reliability, for the scaling it up. As SABIC, we are a leading material supplier in this space. We are committed to electrification. We have launched the Blue Hero initiative, a whole ecosystem that our panel was emphasizing in the morning that, it's not one person's responsibility. It's a shared responsibility for the circular clean air economy. So from SABIC side, we already have a manufacturing operations in Gujarat. We make the thermoplastic materials. Some of the plastic materials are already used by Tata Automotive Components as well, and we are expanding. The second thing, Dr. T.R.B. Raja, Honorable Minister, he really talked about the expertise. Let India be the leader in the technology, and we truly believe in that. We are making some significant investments in India with respect to bringing the technical expertise. We have world-class technology center in Bangalore. It's a 35 acres land, 500 researchers and scientists are there. So we have been continuously investing in the expertise development, collaboration with the value chain partner, and contribute to this journey to electric transition from our side.
Right. And I'll take that to you, Nilesh, how Dhanendra just mentioned, about also sort of developing in India. So on that perspective, do you believe that, it is also a material supplier or material partner's responsibility as well, sort of take the forward step in that direction?
Indeed. So before that, maybe a couple of sentences about whom I represent. So I represent Envalier. It's a company very recently established, but it is in India since long time. It is because of the merger of earlier DSM Engineering Materials and Lanxess High Performance Materials, which came together as Envalior. And we are in engineering material supplier, right? Supplies. So as Mayank, you mentioned about the supply chain challenges in materials, right? So if you talk about rare earths, definitely that is something which is a challenge for this industry, which is not there here. Yeah. But the things which we are in, like what you are as well, Dharendra. So if you talk about for Envalior, from engineering materials, so what we can bring for electric vehicles is, let's say, three parts, yeah? in three parts. And one thing is to make it more safer. Second is to make more lighter and more sustainable. So if you talk about these three topics, the materials which can bring it to make it even more safer, in a sense that we talked about also earlier, one of my friends mentioned about fires, right? How we can make sure that the materials which are used in electric vehicle do not catch fire or delay the fire, right? That's one thing. When you talk about also the higher, if you talk about high fast charging, yeah, mostly it is coming soon, not there right now in India, but maybe it is coming soon. Then the higher comparative tracking index, high CTI materials which are required, right? So those are something which we can bring here. That comes from the safer part. Now that is the safety anxiety which people have. Yeah, and earlier Stellantis was also talking about the anxiety which people have on the range anxiety. The range anxiety is also because of course, the battery, which can address. Second thing is how you can make your vehicle lighter. If the vehicle becomes lighter, of course, then that also impacts positively the range. And not only from the battery components, or there are so many connectors which engineering materials can picture into. But if you talk about the structural parts, talk about just cross-car beam, for example, right? If those are also made lighter, then that also impacts the weight and becomes lighter and more sustainable. More sustainable is not just from, let's say, if the car is lighter, of course, the range is higher and that becomes itself more sustainable. But if the materials which are also coming from bio-based solutions, if the materials are also coming from the circular solutions, right, that impacts more and more to the carbon neutrality. Now, these three parts which I would like to stress more about becoming more safer, more lighter, and more sustainable, that's where the engineering materials fraternity comes into picture. And from anywhere I could say that we are ready, right? As we are there from long time with automotive industry, we are there from long time with electrical and electronics industry. We are there to bring those two together. The positioning which we have as, we have three factories in India. One is in Pantnagar, Uttarakhand, one is in Jhagadia, in Gujarat, and one is in Ranjangaon. So we are well equipped to supply to the whole, the tier 1, tier 2s, as well as OEMs of electric vehicle, the material. So I think we are ready with the technology. We are ready with the materials. We are there to support. So I don't believe that, at least from the engineering materials, there is no challenge. Of course, rare earth, we do understand.
Right. That's a point well taken from you, Nilesh, on the technological as well as the local manufacturing aspect of materials in India. Coming back to you, Vivek, there's another thing, India has proven the reliability of its supply chain during COVID. And, there's a global trend of a China plus one de-risking strategy of OEMs sort of, to sort of decouple themselves from just one sourcing location. So you've just showed your optimism about the Indian supply chain, but do you think that there is also a huge opportunity lying ahead of us with respect to EV components to tap into that opportunity, and gain a sort of a global stand and become a global hub for supply for EV components?
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of the China plus one phrase, because pretty much saying that, you say that you're not good enough. You are only good because somebody doesn't want to buy it from China. You should be able to compete on your own merit and on your own steam. Why not India plus one and somebody else be that plus one? So let's get out of that mindset that we are substandard or second rate and we can't compete. If you have that to compete with, then the barriers are far higher to overcome. Then you will actually compete with people who've never even been in the auto supply chain like Vietnam and Indonesia and Mexico. I mean, why are we putting ourselves in that category? So I'm not a big fan. We were and still do export to China, forget getting their supply chain away. We have been competing with Chinese suppliers for global tenders and winning them on our own merit on technology and cost. The answer is if you build a product that is better, it's cheaper, and you make it convenient for your customer to adopt, you have a right to win. And that's all your mindset should be. Win on your own merit, run your own race. Don't worry about who else is running with you. Set your own goals, and that's the strategy we've been following. Indian EV ecosystem, although nascent, has its own set of challenges. And if you develop it as a copy or as borrowed technology from China or any other country, it is not going to be as effective as it could have been. There are people here who I've met who've been designing vehicles ground up for this market. The duty cycles are different. The usage patterns are different. All of us know axle loading is far more different in India than it is anywhere else. Why not design a product that serves this market? Gather the data. We've been collecting data on vehicle usage patterns for 3 years in India, just so that we can make products that work for this market. If you want to do the same thing for the US or European market, do it on that. Otherwise, when you start with admitting superiority of someone else and trying to catch up to that game, it is always going to be much harder. Your best probability of success is in being yourself. There is no one who is going to be better at being you than you. So let's try to do that rather than China plus one. The global supply chains, though, are reconfiguring. There is going to be great advantages and opportunities in this chaos. As I've said before, chaos is a ladder for those who know how to climb it. So let's use that opportunity. Let's figure out our own niches around our capabilities. But build capability. Capability has to be built around technology, technology, technology. That is all.
But don't you think it's going to be too late if we go around and start reinventing the wheel? I mean, don't you think we'll miss the bus in that case?
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel. The wheel's been around for a long time. The motor's been around for 200 years. The gearbox that we make has been around for 2000. So nobody's asking you to reinvent. It's about reiterate. Iterate as many times, collect as many failure modes as you can. If you have more knowledge of how many ways it fails in a particular condition, your ability to make a better application for that use is going to be higher. There is very few things you can reinvent, by the way. There is nothing even in electric vehicle which has come just now. Thomas Edison and Henry Ford had this very interesting conversation when Henry Ford pitched him the internal combustion engine, and he said that is the most inefficient thing to convert convert energy into power. It should be electric. They could not solve battery for a very long time. In the early 1900s, electric vehicles actually outsold combustion vehicles. But because we couldn't solve battery, we couldn't actually solve it. So it's energy storage. And that too is, again, not a new problem. Lithium ion's been around. Hopefully in 3 to 4 years, as lithium metal, solid state, semi-solid state, something will work out and battery costs go below that 100 per kilowatt hour, I think there will be no question left. There will be only one technology. And this is just a plateau phase which we are going through. And once again, like I said, very few things are reinvented. I mean, Faraday and Maxwell, the motor they made and the motor we make today, fundamentally very few differences, by the way.
Right. Ravi, I'll take that to you. Vivek just mentioned that you need to focus on your capabilities and develop competencies, and then he also mentioned about cost. And I think cost can only be lowered if you sort of expand to a particular scale. Do you think we have the capability to match China with respect to scale? I mean, what is your thought on that?
See, you can't just transplant a Chinese scale into the Indian scale and then hope that you get the business. Okay, so that's not going to happen. Reality of today is the Chinese scale is order of magnitude higher than what we have today, and we have a lot of catching up to do. Okay, so today's our complete passenger car vehicle production is what China had about 15 years ago. They were at 4 million. Today they are at about 13, 14 million. So we can't just think that we have that scale. We don't have it. Okay. So what is it that we can do? The thing which we can do is adapt. There's no harm in trying to get the technology which China has. They have gone through that phase of maturing whatever they have started to do. They have matured their technology and they are using it in a mass scale. Okay, so they have a lot of things which they have gone ahead with, and we have catching up to do in terms of where they are. And this catch up has been possible because they have started far earlier than what we did. And if we have to get to a situation where we are better than them or we need to be equal to them, we have some distance to cover. So we need to be practical about it, understand the scenario. Whilst we kind of bring technology or adapt the technology, we need to be smart enough to ensure that it is kind of, one is frugal in nature, the other is that it is absolutely worthy of exporting it to the world, because today the other part of the world other than China is also trying to catch up with China. They're not ahead of China in this game. So you have a massive opportunity in terms of the markets available in India, Europe, US, and wherever, even Mexico for that matter. And we need to be agile to that particular aspect, that we shouldn't be looking at a market small as the size of India and say that we don't have the scale. It's important to address scale in a modular fashion. Like you shouldn't be looking at scale and then making a massive capex into it, but it should be possible to do that in the modular fashion, which is what we did in our battery pack manufacturing. We today still have, for about 7 gigawatt hour capacity of battery pack, we have 18 lines. So that may not be the case in the next phase, where we may have only 4 or 5 lines for this capacity. But then in the initial phase, we have had to do with this kind of an approach where we go for modular investments, and we need to also, as a component player, hedge our bets. Okay, so hedging our bet is very important, because we can hedge our bets because we have the ICE components in supply. If we were a pure EV component supplier, we wouldn't be able to hedge our bets. It would be a completely all or nothing kind of scenario. So the catch-up game has to be played in a smart way, but we cannot be wishing away the fact that whatever is available in China today is quite a few years ahead of where we are.
I'll press you a bit on that. You mentioned about modularity. So, in case of EVs, how easy or difficult it is for a component maker to sort of diversify from one product category to the other, maybe from one vehicle category to the other. If you're making a motor for cars, so how difficult or different it is, to go into two-wheelers or commercial vehicles.
So the aspect of modularity will be different for different components. If we take an electric compressor, for example, which we are making, the modularity is simpler. If we take battery pack, the modularity is also relatively simpler. But if we go into the traction motor, the modularity becomes a little bit tougher. The aspect of EV today is that it is in several segments. So you start from a two-wheeler, you go up to the buses. And the spectrum is very wide, and the demand scenario is also like 2 and 3 wheelers is much higher, buses is quite okay, and in between we have some passenger cars. We don't have any much traction in the truck segment moving. So it's two ends of the spectrum. So the modularity too has its challenges, although I preach that. But in case of pack, it is easier to do. In case of motors, it's tougher to do. And in case of other components like compressors and all, it is even easier to do. So we'll have to judge the component which we are trying to do or the aggregate which we are trying to do, and then take a call on this modularity aspect.
Right. Vivek, you have something to add on that?
No, I'm with sir on modularity, but yeah, 100,000 for motors is the line size. So you can't be too timid and say 10,000 because then you'll never get the economies of scale. 100,000 seems to be the size. Earlier when we used to do starters, we used to do 1 million was the size, but EV 100,000 because modularity is actually very poor. As soon as the dia changes, everything goes for a toss, then voltage systems, there's too many factors. But yeah, I mean, I think we do about 25,000 a month now. When we started, we used to do 200 3 years ago. So what took China, like sir said, 10 years, we are getting there in 2 to 3 years. So you can't, this balance of timidity versus boldness has to be struck carefully, and you got to figure that out. What is the line size? But then there are many other components, like people, my friends sitting here, in materials, in transmission systems, where actually the fungibility of capex is very, very high. So apart from the final assembly line, pretty much the capex is similar, where you can set up, like in differentials, I think we're doing about 1.5 to 1.6 million a year, which you can do much easier. So the capex or the return is much better. So various components will have their various strategies and various problems. But again, not intractable, and because the return periods are still in less than 5 years, I think the component makers of India have a very, very good shot at competing globally. But the mindset has to be global. Don't only look at India market.
Right.
Then it's always going to be too small. And
Right.
then your ability to invest goes down.
Right, right.
So-
And I think, Vivek, you have a flight to catch, so we'll have to excuse Vivek. And thank you, Vivek, so much for taking out the time for us, and really appreciate you coming over here. Thank you so much. Thanks. So I'll take that to you, Dhanendra. Like Vivek just mentioned that, you have to have a global mindset. So, we are talking about this China versus India, what are our capabilities compared to China, which has an enormous scale. So, some of the advantages versus the things that we are falling short on, what according to you are some of those factors?
So looking at the India, and I'm very closely associated, actually I've worked here for multiple years, then I moved to Detroit, now I work in a motor town of the world, Detroit. 3 things come to the mind. The first thing is the creativity, the talent we have here, the expertise we have, that's none to anywhere in the world. So really the creativity is the first thing. The second thing is agility. You can go fast here. I have seen it myself. Like in a recent example, it's a swappable batteries for the two-wheelers, and it's the first time use of plastic there, which got the Society of Plastic Engineers Innovation Award. That can only happen in India. So it's a creativity, it's a agility, it's a talent which is here that sets us apart from the rest of the world. And you can see a few of the examples. If you stop by it, there's a small section here where you can see some of the very unique materials that play a role in this journey. Like Nilesh was talking about the fire safety, Batteries catching fire is a really serious phenomena. And if somebody can say you can make a plastic that can make your batteries safer, it's not easy to understand. But if you walk around, you'll go there and take a look at the part, how this can work as a barrier, how it can increase the safety. All those work, the developments, the minds are here in the India. So scale is important. The creativity and the expertise is equally important.
Right, right. Nilesh, you want to add to that, because in your previous comment, you also touched upon, doing development in India. So you want to add to what Dhanendra has just mentioned?
Yeah, actually, I would not repeat. I fully agree with what Dhanendra mentioned. But maybe one thing which I would say that the word which is called as global, right? So the MNCs, which are also around here, having the global mindset and operating locally as per the requirement of local organizations, demand and consumers, that is very much important. So as you talked about, Narendra, about the technology, right? The technology, the quality, which is already established somewhere in Europe and US, right? But bringing that to the modularity is also one of the point, right? To really make sure that this can be utilized, used in India. But I can also add one more point about the innovation. So innovation is not about, I'm coming from the R&D background. So if I'm thrown a challenge that improve the comparative tracking index from 600 to 900, yeah, I will be very interested in working on it. But is consumer ready to pay for it, right? And I was talking to the OEMs this morning, and the question which I asked is, what is the next revolution which is going to happen, or disruption? And the thing which came is cost, right? It's not about the technology, it's the cost. And when I said local, having the local, let's say, innovation centers, the R&D centers, which can also help to more value addition and value engineering, right? And adopting to the local requirements, it's something which is very much important. So having that mindset of quality and technology, of course, technology has to be there, the mindset of quality, and operating locally as per the requirements is something which is a key, I believe.
And with that, I think we are also running out of time, so we'll close this session. And thank you so much, all of you, for a very insightful discussion and bringing your perspectives about how we can sort of enhance the localization of components with respect to electric vehicles in India. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.